Good morning and welcome to One Sustainability, our 2022 conference. We are kicking off a week here of many wonderful speakers, and we are very pleased this morning as our opening speaker to welcome Xavier Michon. He is the Deputy Executive Director of the United Capital Development Fund, and his topic today is connecting capital to impact-driven entrepreneurs in frontier and emerging economies. Xavier, good to see you. I understand you're joining us today from Ethiopia. So welcome. Thank you for spending time with us and kicking off our conference. We look forward to your remarks.
Good morning, Glenn, and very nice seeing you again. And thank you for having me. And I'll do my best considering the jet lag. So again, we wanted to discuss a little bit today a topic that is, I think, discussed by many of us, at least in the space of the provision of capital, whether it's commercial in commercial terms or in other via other means like the Capital Development Fund, which is how we entice capital to lend in developing economies where we do believe that these are the markets of the future and there are great opportunities. I mean, as I said, I just landed in Ethiopia and I just come after, 4 years? And yeah, every time I come, I'm always surprised by the new investment, the new towers, and now there's the whole subway that has been built a couple of years ago, and there's another train that has been built down to Djibouti, and this is a country in the go, in a country that is also on the go, and I do believe that there's much more that we should do, and so that's basically the message I'd like to convey in a continent that, as you know, is a continent that has just created a free trade zone, which is the African Continental Free Trade Zone. And for those who, are not really aware of it, it was created in 2021, I think early in 2021, but it's the largest free trade zone in the world. And we're talking about 1.3 billion people and in 55 countries. And if those numbers do not resonate, I do believe that hopefully they will resonate as of now. But again, this is not only a continent full of resources, which is what comes out of it. I mean, and then of course, arable land and water and so on. But I see that there's a striving entrepreneurship and youth that is really leading the way, middle class that is emerging and booming. So this is definitely a place to be. And this is definitely someone with capital or who wants to have commercial relationships should pay attention to this continent that has a great diversity and great potential. So again, the conversation today was, if I'm interested to explore emerging economies and developing economies and frontier economies, what are the experiences, and maybe I can talk on behalf of the Capital Development Fund. Our mandate is exactly that, is just to let's say to support developing economies, frontier economies, and emerging economies, of course, in the growth. And what we do is, of course, we do invest in concessional terms, and we're trying to hopefully via successful investment that are impactful, try to show again investors and other players that there are markets that are receptive, where there are opportunities, and then they should piggyback on basically on the pipeline that we develop. And we see that let's say with more frequency, and that there's more interest from a diverse set of players, where there are big multinationals, big investors that we all know the names of, but also new players that today are expressing interest. And just to give you an idea, we have just set up 2 investment funds with 2 fund managers, and exactly that they are only tackling those economies, and these are investments that are anchored in Europe, and they're basically connecting a pipeline that we have seeded by our investments that we connect to an investment fund, and then that investment fund is connected to private capital markets. And I think this is a good narrative, and it's also a good indication that the opportunities that can be showcased and they can then connect it to other forms of capital. But today I wanted to talk about something different. This is more traditional. I think many other players will recognize something similar in what they do. But what we wanted to share with you is there are other expressions to connect those 2 worlds that are looking for each other, that they know or don't know each other. And again, I'm talking about capital and entrepreneurship. And what we have discussed, and we have just launched a couple of weeks ago, as what we call a Tinder for providers of capital and entrepreneurs. And we have come with this idea over the last few years, where we have done surveys during COVID and in all the developing economies. And one of the messages that we got across the board is that independently of who you are, large company, small company, early stage, scaling up, one sector or the other, basically being on a virtual space is a must. It's a space of opportunity, it's a space of, in terms of accessing financing, to getting visibility, seeing other opportunities with finding partners. And that was a strong message that we have received throughout basically the last few years. And I think it has been exacerbated by COVID that has generated that awareness. And that's from Mali to more developed economies. I don't know, the South Africas, the Nigerias, the Kenyas of this world, going down to the Malis with young entrepreneurs that are telling us exactly the same thing. So this idea matured over on the long run. And we said, why don't we create a Tinder for exactly for those two worlds, knowing that what we see is also, on one hand, providers of capital are coming to see us and they tell us, look, we have financing, but where do we land? What country? Do you have pipeline to offer us? And that's something, a continuous message that we get. Whomever we talk to is looking for a pipeline, and everybody's looking for the perfect investment. And so that's one thing. But also we have entrepreneurs that are seeking opportunities, and they're finding difficult to find providers of capital. And I'm not saying that it's a lack of capacity, is that we see that entrepreneurs are not only MBAs. These are people that are coming from the tech industry. They're people from agro engineers and so on. So basically, they're not really used to the language of those that are providing capital. And someone used an expression which I'm always using now. It's part of the messaging. Basically, they were telling me these entrepreneurs, they don't know how to dress to the party, and basically the party of the providers of capital. They don't know how to speak the language. They don't know how to present themselves. They don't know what channels to use, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's something that, is something that would even extend with a different, let's say, intensity in more developed economies. But we have a more structured means to connect those two worlds. So we have been developing that idea. We have been using sounding boards with our partners just to make sure that this wasn't an idea that was, let's say, that wasn't resonating. And actually, we have received, let's say, an unanimous response from development banks, from private banks, from business associations, investment, of course, outlets, Chamber of Commerce, and of course, national partners that are in that space, starting from investment promotion agencies, ministries of finance, economy, and so on. And so that wasn't that crazy. And we started developing that with many partners over the last year. And basically the idea is, why don't we start creating that space? And I'll be a little bit more explicit. What we want is to create a space whereby an entrepreneur can create a profile, be visible, but not just and go beyond that, in the sense that we didn't want to have just yellow pages or white pages, this is my name, this is my address, this is what I do, and contact me if you feel like it. And I think that wasn't something that was sufficient. The first thing. The second thing is that we didn't want to have a space whereby basically we can claim that a deal is made, in the sense that there is assessed pipeline that is basically ready to be invested in. And we know that that's something that doesn't happen over the web. So what we thought is, why don't we create a space where basically entrepreneurs can generate a set of data and we assess it. And by this, we can present basically leads rather than a duly assessed pipeline. So for that purpose, what we have done is developing a methodology using our methods, but basically we use an algorithm to assess a company based on its data. So the idea is that any entrepreneurs from outside, that is from one side, is uploading its data, creating a profile in the platform, is basically providing a data set which is under the form of a questionnaire, which has pre-populated answers. So we standardizing basically the answers. And by standardizing the answers, we are able to basically associate that with coefficients or weights and basically being able to assess the company. And so we provide a full assessment of the company according to, let's say, all the points that we utilize for due diligence in normal terms, but without a rating. So it's basically a set of colors. It's like a dashboard, but it provides a basis for the investors to have, let's say, a first look at the company in terms of what it is doing, its finances, of course, its risk, its prospects, and so on, and the market where it operates. And we thought that was a good way to introduce two parts on an informed setting. So we have developed that proprietary algorithm that is something that allows us to not only assess and provide a view of the company, but allows us to do scale. We have seen in other cases, we have done some commercial operations that are trying to do the same thing, but of course behind they have analysts that are assessing the companies, and of course they have tens, maybe a couple of hundred of companies. And so for us, thinking that we were doing that with a much larger scale, it would have been impossible to do that with analysts. So we used an algorithm. The second point for us, which is important also, is that this is not something that is done by just pressing a button. My headquarters are in New York, so let's say pressing a button from New York and hoping for the best. Actually, we are combining, let's say, virtual with presential. So by being on the ground, by being capable of interacting with national authorities, we enticing them basically to bring the ecosystem of SMEs and other, let's say, larger enterprises in that space. So what we have done is tested, and since we just launched 3 weeks ago, we have just launched in Senegal, Sao Tome and Principe, and Uganda, and basically that was after long dialogue conversation with the Ministry of Finance of at least 2 of those countries, the Chamber of Commerce, the investment promotion agencies, the business associations. And the idea is through that, we not only entice those entities that basically access that ecosystem of entrepreneurs, but also we bring ownership in that process, and we bring, you say, more participation. So the concept we have is not only, let's say, pressing a button, but it's in every country where we deploy. And the idea, we will deploy to all the 47 at least developed countries. And so and then we'll extend to the developing world, is that in every country, the prerequisite, it is basically the national authorities on board, whether they're private or public. And I think that's a key differentiator in terms of deploying. And so that's something that requires some work, but has been part of the differentiator in developing this tool. And seeing the time I have, and just to make sure. So for the time being, what we are doing is testing into countries. So far, we have a great deal of data, and we're seeing how we're seeing, let's say, what is the user experience. And of course, when we see that we can leverage a great set of entrepreneurs that are seeking financing, now we see that basically investors are coming and are coming of interest because they can find leads and they can connect to. So the system, to make sure it's very simple. It's basically like you have in LinkedIn. You see someone that you're interested in, you signal that you're interested in, and on the receiving end, basically you signal that also when you receive an invitation, you want to connect. And so the platform is a platform to reduce that gap, to generate basically a connection between those two sides. And hopefully, this will lead to a much, let's say, detailed conversation. And hopefully this will lead to a commercial contract, to some form of transfer of capital or collaboration. And we see that that's something that is needed for developing economies. And overall, so far, we're getting a positive feedback. So just to conclude, and looking at my time, the platform is much more than that, in the sense that it provides all the functionalities to the entrepreneur. They have access to, of course, to their peers. Actually, we provide them also, based on the data they provide, a presentation sheet of the company. What we see is that many banks we've talked to, they told us, what we'd like to have is a standard way, so that basically entrepreneurs can introduce themselves, and basically a free pager that basically, according to a standard set of data, structured a certain way, they can introduce themselves. So we have actually a second algorithm that allows to basically extract that data and with full sentences present the company from what it does, the market it operates, down to its prospects, in the middle its financing, and so on. And this is another tool that we put at disposal. So again, this is a beginning of a journey. We're seeing that so far we're responding to a necessity. We will add over, on the long run, I think other functionalities because of the time being, you can only access individual deals, but we know from several partners that maybe also there's a portfolio approach whereby basically I'm an investor, I'm seeking deals that are corresponding to certain criteria, so that basically I have an approach that basically bundles up or syndicates those deals, and that will be a feature we'll put in the future. So overall, what I wanted to share is this, in the sense that it's something new, at least in that space. I think the component also that I would like to stress is that capability of you leveraging technology, but also leveraging, let's say, direct engagement and access with national advisors and bring them on board. And that also is a component that is important. And actually, we also bring on board international players. So, for example, the International Chamber of Commerce, the World for Poor Program, the largest business association in Africa, which is Business Africa, have also joined, and basically they utilize basically their brand name and the network, and they come in. And there will be other partners that along the way will have signaled to us that they want to be associated to this initiative. Knowing that they see a space where you can exactly source potential partners, source potential deals, and and start a dialogue with entities that maybe they wouldn't have not sourced via their own channels. And that's something that exactly what we want to do is provide a larger pool of let's say, of potential entrepreneurs that are seeking financing, that are seeking partners, and engaging them with investors, with commercial partners, with actors like us that provide concessional and financing. And we are constantly on the look for potential investees. So our role in this case is reducing that gap between capital and entrepreneurship in frontier and developing economies. And I do believe that this is something that hopefully will resonate at wider scale. And our ambition, of course, is put thousands of companies, knowing that basically the idea is to process that information with algorithms. And that's one of the differentiators that allows us also to reach scale. So this is a small contribution, but so far what we're seeing is that is responding to a need, and actually based on, let's say, on the use cases on these two countries, so far we have a good traction, and hopefully we'll go to, let's say, a larger scale in terms of country coverage over the next months. Knowing that it's a huge task, but we do believe that that could be one of the tools that we can be utilized to expand basically the reach and access to investors, and it can also be used by Wall Street, that can be used by other partners in terms of reaching out to these markets that from time to time are question marks, or you don't know where to start. So what we do is providing an access. And let me start with the last point. It's provided by, since it's sponsored by the UN, it's a free tool. So there are no commercial fees behind, there are no hidden fees. This data is stored by us. So of course we don't utilize it for commercial purposes. And I think that's also another, let's say, signal on both sides that it's done for the intentionality that basically was designed to, which is basically reducing that gap. So again, we are at the beginning. This is a journey as a startup. The UN is behaving like this, and we're also taking chances and risks. And we have launched that product, and we believe that it will scale, and that will provide an answer to something that is needed, which is exactly putting these two groups together. And what we're trying to do is to reduce that gap. So this is something I wanted to share, knowing that it gets out a little bit of the let's say what is expected from us. And in this case, we have decided to be a little bit more, let's say, daring, and create a coalition of like-minded institutions that are willing to support this initiative. So of course, we will be willing to collaborate with And again, it's not talking about financing. I think it is much more like that we're looking at. Financing is taken care of, but it's more networking, knowledge, it's brand name association and so on towards this initiative, which we do believe is really responding to the necessities in the markets where we operate. So that was basically a little bit the thinking, and I'm happy to have any questions or react. And of course, with you, Glenn, I'm sure you'll have some couple of items to share with me. Over to you, Glenn.
I do. Thank you. Terrific presentation, as always. Wow, it's a great example of the United Nations actually kind of being entrepreneurial, right? Taking those kinds of initiatives in Africa and setting up this platform for people and businesses and entrepreneurs to talk to each other. Really fascinating. You said 1.3 billion people, 55 countries. As a startup, right? You're just kind of getting up and going. How about some of the more, you mentioned South Africa, Nigeria, and one other country as more Kenya as more developed. Do you expect them to participate as well, or would they be quote unquote too sophisticated?
So the idea, we're starting with the least developed countries, and that's the initial layout, but we will expand to all those countries. What we want to have is a key differentiator, at least as a positioning. By the way, and I forgot to even, you see, I'm a bad, let's say, advertiser. The platform is called Agora, which in Greek is the meeting place. That was the square where they were the philosophers, the politicians, the markets. And so we thought it was a place of space of convergence. And the idea was to convert into that space. And the link is agora-sme.org. So for those who are curious and want to update the data. So yes, the rollout is initially in the, let's say, in the less, appetizing markets. And so again, and everybody's, we know that capital is let's say starting in those countries that I mentioned, to learn in those countries, but the other economies that deserve attention, as I said, who would have thought about Sao Tome and Principe? Well, today you'll find a couple of companies, and knowing that it's a very small country, but just to give you an idea, this is where where Google is, they have, so they're supporting the expansion of the access to data, and they have financed a whole under the sea cable to provide additional bandwidth to the internet. And actually that cable ends in Sao Tome and Principe, and then it's dispatched from many parts in the continent. So again, these are things that when you start realizing the realities, and it's I'm sure it's an investment that is huge. I don't know the size of it, but again, it's financed by Google itself. So these are signal that things are happening, and for those who are interested, I think this is one of the tools that you can utilize if you're interested to find potential partners to connect with in terms of commercial partners and investees. So again, roll out in let's say in those markets that today are not resonating as much, but the expansion will be certainly the entire development world, and ideally will be present in the 55 countries, but don't expect that to happen and in a glimpse of an eye, knowing that we do believe that the key differentiator, but also if we're looking at this initiative over the long run, is that basically we have national entities on board and they're fully supportive, and with that, just don't do it without, let's say, without that wouldn't be the appropriate way to do it.
Xavier, we posted the contact information in the chat for anyone on the pathway to take a look at the website. Now, you said you had a lot of support from as the rollout continues, the Ministry of Finance, Chamber of Commerce, business associations. Any of those span the continent itself, or is it very much country by country?
So we have two sets of partners. So again, when you go to a house, you always ask for permission, you ring on the door, and you hope that your host will receive it. So I think with national partners, I think that's the basic concept. There's a concept of ownership. So in the country we operate, we talk to the Ministry of Finance, Economy, the Business Association, Investment Promotion Agencies, and that has been basically the idea. But we have talked actually with about 50 multinationals, development banks, as I said, business associations, and 5 already have embarked, knowing that what we do believe is the idea is to create a coalition behind this initiative, and the coalition is just basically associating your brand name to it, expanding a network, and talk about it, and reach out to your networks to tell them about this opportunity. And that's basically this is the nature of the engagement, and that was initially also for me a way to make sure that the project per se was resonating and responding to a real necessity. So when certain banks told me, it is yes, we need something of that nature, of course it reinforced the idea that we were going in the right direction. And now that we're deploying, since we started deploying 3 weeks ago, we will go back to them to make sure that they formally joining and participating under the terms that I discussed with you.
No, that's fantastic. Congratulations on all your good work. As you said, it's a meeting place, and as word spreads and as connectivity being what it is, it gets very exponential. And that's certainly I would imagine will be the goal, and I'm sure that's going to be your experience as this continues to roll out. And it's interesting. I mean, last time we spoke a couple of months back, you were still kind of in the process of developing and thinking about it and working on it, and here you are now launched. So congratulations on that. So Xavier, thank you for joining us here, kicking off our One Sustainability Conference on our platform, One Business World. So we really do appreciate all your time. We wish you nothing but success and all the best with the UN CDF. Great work. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for having me, Glenn, and looking forward to the next time.
Thanks for today. Take good care.
Bye.
Bye.